there's two major strands, and one is that it was spread on purpose or created on purpose, and the other strand is that it's being exaggerated, probably to hurt the president.
Hey, welcome to Unlatched Mind. My guest today is Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Miami, Joe Uscinski. Joe studies public opinion and mass media with a focus on conspiracy theories and all things misinformation and disinformation. Obviously, with this pandemic, we really focused on some of the conspiracy theories that are surrounding COVID, things like that. So interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. So with that, I give you Joe Uscinski. Well, Joe, thank you so much. I do appreciate your time today.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
I appreciate it. Well, before we jump in, obviously this is a hot topic, right? COVID conspiracies. We're in different times now, and of course the conspiracy theorists are, they're out there and they're hitting their stride, I'd say. But there's a lot to talk about here. But before we get started, can you kind of give the listeners a little bit of background on who you are?
So I'm a professor at the University of Miami in the political science department, and I've been there for 13 or 14 years now. I started out studying the media and why they ran the stories that they did. And my basic argument was that it's profit motives that drive journalism, and it is, public opinion often comes first, and then the media will put their thumb to the wind, see what people want to hear about, and then report on those things. And that's an interesting conception, one that we really have to pay attention to now, because it makes us question how much does the media really impact people's beliefs, or are they just giving people what they want? Mm-hmm. And then after I sort of got sick of working on that, I jumped into the conspiracy thing. And I thought it was just, these are fringe beliefs, they're sort of kooky and weird and it's off the beaten path, but nobody really cares about this. So I can sort of do this thing and be left alone. and I think both of those topics together, with the ideas of fake news and conspiracy theory sort of overtaking everything. I guess in one way I would like to say that, I'm prophetic and I knew what people would be talking about years after the fact, and I picked the right topic.
Right.
But I think in other ways, I think I sort of stepped in it, and now I'm sort of stuck with this thing.
Yeah. Well, it's just kind of, I feel like we'll get into like a little bit of psychology of why these things actually exist and why people jump into this conspiracy pool. But I think it scratches an itch that we all have deep down inside for better or for worse. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon, and I think you probably attest to that. But so I do want to jump into specifically the COVID conspiracy theories that are floating around. Obviously, there's at least a handful that are like you said, aren't really you don't really think of the dude in his mom's basement with a tinfoil hat. You kind of they're becoming much more mainstream than that. But I guess in general, just what is a conspiracy theory? Just start with the most basic, thumb down.
So it's an accusatory perception that focuses on a small group of usually powerful people acting in secret for their own benefit against the common good, and in a way that undermines our bedrock ground rules against the widespread use of force and fraud. And this theory would contradict or go beyond what our knowledge-generating authorities have said about the topic. So in that case, if you go back to the Kennedy assassination, the knowledge-generating authority would have been the Warren Commission. So if you're saying, the Warren Commission missed a giant conspiracy that involved the mafia and the CIA or something, then you're engaging in conspiracy theory because it goes against what the experts have said on it.
Right.
And one important part that I want to stress there is that, sometimes the experts get things wrong, sometimes by accident, sometimes on purpose. So I believe the experts when the experts have expertise in that particular relevant area, and they've made their data and results open so that everyone can come in and examine that data and refute it if need be.
Right.
So in that sense, I think the answer to experts getting things wrong is more experts, not more conspiracy theories.
Right.
So whereas a conspiracy theory can be valuable in the sense that it might push for more information and push for more study, I wouldn't end there with a conspiracy theory. I'd say, okay, well, let's have more scientists and more experts,
right.
Not more conspiracy theorists.
Now, is there a slippery slope? So, I mean, what is the threshold, I guess, that exists before something goes from healthy skepticism, right, and just like, well, I want to be a free thinker, and I'm not going to just be, I'm not going to just accept everything I hear from the, what did you call them, the knowledge-based?
Knowledge generating institutions.
Okay. So I would think our government politicians, the public MDs that are giving, right, especially with this pandemic, there's public, MDs voicing all sorts of opinions. They're not all in sync. So I would assume all those bodies come from that definition. So
actually no. So I would not put the president or a random congressperson or, just some doctor on Twitter as a expert in a particular area, right? I would say that they're probably an expert in something that they are an expert in and know about, but not anything outside of that. Trump can tell. It's probably an expert on what it's like to be the president and can tell me what he does with his day, and I'll believe him more than I would believe somebody else who's not there with him. But I wouldn't take Trump's word on what medicine to take because he doesn't know anything. And I wouldn't believe a random doctor, on Twitter saying whatever about something.
Yeah.
I would rather rely on the doctor who says, listen, there are careful studies on this medicine. It's been shown to work across a number of studies, and a majority of people who do what I do agree with me.
Now,
and then I say, okay, yeah.
But is that now? I 100% agree with you. However, the average, I mean, just look at this country for example. The average person does the average person think that much about where they would just take look at a Trump or a Dr. Fauci. Hopefully, I think folks would take Dr. Fauci's word over Trump's word when it comes to the medical advice. That's kind of what he's there for. But the average person, I think, looking at these figures of power tend to assume what they're saying is factual. Is that just our naivete, or I mean, that doesn't, it's. I feel like they'd be perceived as these knowledge bases that perhaps, to your point, they should not be.
Well, when Fauci's talking about COVID, he is pretty much an expert, and he's relaying things that are of value, and have a lot of science and evidence behind them. So I think it's completely reasonable to take him at face value for the most part, because he's not saying things that go beyond the data. And when he does, he usually prefaces it with saying, well, we have projections, or we're trying to make our best guess into the future or whatnot. But there are people who don't believe what he says. And there are lots of people who don't believe what majorities of climatologists say about something like climate change. And there are people who believe Trump no matter what he says.
Right.
So people are picky and choosy with who they want to believe, because they have, all sorts of dispositions that lead them to believe some people and not believe others. And the science and the evidence behind what those people are saying be damned.
Yeah, of course. And of course, with the internet, right? I mean, confirmation bias, you can type in a search for something that you're thinking of and you want confirmation on, even whether you know you want confirmation on or not, you're not truly just searching for information. You're basically going to get, a billion hits that basically back up what you just typed in. So how you phrase the question is it's amazing.
True.
Yeah.
That's true, and it was going on before the internet, where we chose our friends and we choose who we want to listen to, and we chose what TV and who we called and everything. Like, people like to imagine this history where before the internet we were all living in a truth utopia, and it just didn't work that way. I mean, people relied on village wisdom.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is the thing. If you want to throw out the internet because it has some conspiracy theories and some misinformation on it, you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because most of what's on the internet, I mean, it gives us access to all sorts of authoritative knowledge that we never had before. I mean, The favorite example I like to use is in the 70s, when I was a kid and got a sunburn, my grandmother would rely on village wisdom to,
Yep.
she asked the neighbors what to do. Oh, rub butter on them.
Yeah, yeah.
It only takes 1 second to Google that. It says, no, don't.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. No,
But so we don't have to engage in those behaviors anymore. We can get authoritative knowledge, but it's the people choosing to go after the untrustworthy sources and the goofy knowledge. That's the problem. But they were doing that before the internet too.
100%. The internet, it just makes things more efficient. No matter what that thing is,
Yeah.
it's sharing of information, sharing of accurate, good information, sharing of terrible, bad information. I mean, it just makes everything more efficient, the good and the bad. So yeah, 100% right.
Yeah,
there.
and that's the thing is that people ascribe to information on the internet powers that information doesn't have. So they're like, oh, when false information is on the internet, it spreads and everyone believes it.
Right.
But somehow true information doesn't have that power. Like, why is that? And why do we ascribe that power to just false things, but not true things?
Yeah.
So it's there's nothing magic about conspiracy theories or wrong stuff that gets people to buy into it. It's the people who are attracted to certain kinds of information that makes them want to believe those things.
Yeah. And one common thread through all of this stuff is human nature and just how our brain works, and for whatever reason, it's interesting.
Yeah, like journalists call me all the time. They're like, "Well, this new conspiracy theory on the internet, and everyone's going to see it and believe it." And I say, "Well, did you see it? Yeah. Well, did you believe it? No."
Right.
Well, what makes you so special? Why do you have these magic powers?
Right.
And the answer is it's not just them, and it's not just everyone's going to see it and believe it. It's people choose to access it. They choose to set up their own information environments, and they choose what they want to believe from within that.
Right.
So it's a human problem. It's not a technology problem. It's a human problem. I mean, are there things we can do to sort of cut down on the spread of some of these things? Sure, and probably we should. But it's not an easy task to undertake, and we have to understand that even if we shut down the trafficking, the spread across technology of all wrong information, people can still make up whatever they want with their imaginations, right?
Right. But then you get the problem of who determines, right from wrong. I mean, some of these things are very ridiculous. Like, and you can just kind of like, okay, and I think you had given some numbers. Like there's some of these that are like in the 1% following, but some of them are pretty high. Like, and we'll jump to that's a good jumping point. Cause I wanted to talk about in this case, right? The COVID's case, what are the big, cause I wanted to get, I saw a few interviews you had done. You had mentioned like 30%, like 1 in 3 people are actually believe in X, Y, and Z. So kind of wanted to jump there. What are the big conspiracies related to COVID? Obviously that's the main topic here. So what are the big 3, 4, 5 that you're seeing?
So there's 2 major strands, and one is that it was spread on purpose or created on purpose, and the other strand is that it's being exaggerated, probably to hurt the president. And we get about almost a third of Americans agreeing with each one of those. Now those are sort of general conspiracy ideas. You can get more specific, and then you start naming, is it Bill Gates? Is it George Soros? Right. Is it China, Russia? Was it predicted by a Dean Koontz novel who wanted to tell us the truth about it 40 years in advance?
That's right.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of weird permutations of each of these, but the 2 major strands are, what I would call the sort of bioweapon idea, and then the it's not really dangerous, it's being exaggerated idea.
But 30%, that's all. I mean, that's a little crazy, right? You're around 9 people, 3 of them say,
so
I believe
yes
this.
and no. Yes and no. I mean, it's higher than some and lower than others. I mean, what a lot of people don't know is that it only took a few months after President Kennedy was assassinated for half the country to believe in some form of conspiracy theory around that. It took only a few more years after that for 80% of Americans to buy in. Now, that's sort of rare. You don't normally get those numbers, but just for comparison's sake, I mean, Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories were about 80% for several decades. And it was only in the last 20 years that those numbers have come down to around 40, 50%. And they continue to go down. But that seems to be the highest we've gotten, 80%. Rarely do you get that because a lot of conspiracy theories, just people don't get into them, or some have a partisan element, which sort of cuts the amount of people that would buy into it in half.
Yeah, yeah.
But I give you some other numbers. I mean, we ask about the deep state. We get 40%, which is higher than that. Is the deep state controlling the government? Yeah. Does the 1% control the government, which is Bernie Sanders' idea? That's 54%. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot of people there. So there are some that are more and some that are less, and it's both good news and bad news depending on how you interpret it. I mean, it's good news that it's not higher, and there seems to be a natural ceiling to it. I'm going to continue polling on these, so we'll find out where they go. But I think I'd prefer that both of those ideas be lower. But I think people are sort of ringing the alarm bell, saying, "Oh my God, everyone's going off the conspiracy cliff," and it doesn't seem to be that way yet with these conspiracy theories. There seemed to be a natural ceiling.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, what is there like a degree of plausibility that you should apply to any conspiracy theory or any theory before we, like, in other words, is it just ridiculous and then it's like, okay, well, your intuition just tells you it's ridiculous. But the problem I think with some of these is there's little shreds and pieces of possibility throughout some of them. So then folks that just want to stop thinking at that point wrap the whole thing up and like, yep, I believe it. When if you just kind of took a step back and say, yeah, there's little bits of plausibility to some of that, but the overall thing doesn't make sense. Or am I just overthinking it?
Well, I mean, that's true, but the problem with that is that everybody's intuition is different. So the conspiracy theories that they're going to think are true are going to be those that match with what they already believe.
Yeah.
So I'll give you one good example. I have a colleague who says, this whole Obama birth certificate thing is completely stupid, but there's good evidence that George W. Bush blew up the Twin Towers. It's like, wait a minute. I mean, they're both stupid. I mean, and there's, and in my view, there's not good evidence for either. They're completely dumb.
Right.
But depending on what you already believe, that's going to drive how you view the evidence of each of those. Right. So, well, and then even on top of that, it's not beliefs about the evidence that drive it. It's just going to ring true, and then people will get the evidence if they even bother to do that at all.
Yeah.
So you can find quote unquote evidence for any theory you come up with. I mean, the guy who pushes the theory that shape-shifting lizard people control the planet. I mean, he's written 10 books, 500 pages each, which he says are chock full of evidence, and I've read through it, and there's lots of quote unquote evidence in it. But it doesn't convince me of anything, right? But him and his followers are thoroughly convinced, and they will say, we have good evidence.
Can you repeat what this dude, what is his topic? What?
So he believes that there are shape-shifting reptilian lizard people who control the planet, and you can't see them because they come in and out of visible light. But they are the people that we can see, like the Bushes, the Obamas, and the Queen of England, are all part lizard. So they're descendant of an ancient lizard line.
You don't believe this?
It's a tough. I
sounds like an amazing. Sounds like an amazing fiction story. I mean, that sounds like fantastic Stephen King stuff.
I've supported it in the sense that I purchased the books because I've had to, and I've read some of this stuff, and I watch interviews with them, and there is a small cadre of people who buy into this idea, but it's, and to them, they'll say, I believe it because of the evidence. Right. But there are other people who look at the evidence and say, I don't believe it because there's no evidence. And I'm not sure the evidence is driving any of those people. Like, I don't need to examine evidence of this to say no.
Right.
That's largely my intuition. But I mean, again, I come back to how I would categorize all conspiracy theories is that until the knowledge generating institutions say this is what's going on, I'm not really going to put much stock in it.
Right. It's just crazy. I mean, yeah. Now, how does the media? I mean, between social media and and the mainstream media with cable news or other. I mean, they have obviously to your point at the beginning here. I mean, their role is certainly not insignificant. And how are they hurting or helping?
No, and the problem is that they love to blame in the mainstream media, the legacy media. They love to blame Twitter and Facebook for all this, but they've played a major role in this. I mean, I think one of my favorites is like recently, I think both the Times and the Post have been putting out a bunch of stories about UFOs. And they know what they're doing because they're using UFO to mean unidentified object. But they know what they're doing when they put that in a headline that it says alien. They know
Right.
people, oh, there's aliens flying around, and the government's been covering it up, but finally they had to release this, and it's like, no,
It's just
this is
that the
all
object
nonsense.
wasn't identified. That's all they're saying.
They didn't know what it was at the
Yes.
time, but there's a completely reasonable explanation
Right.
that doesn't involve flying saucers and spaceships and whatnot.
Yeah.
But they traffic it in anyway. Turn on the History Channel. It used to be about history, and now it's about ancient aliens building the pyramids and stuff. So a bunch of conspiracy nonsense that they delve into. And I think they had a primetime show running for the last couple of months about, alien investigations during the 1950s and how the government was covering up alien technology and stuff.
I mean, was there a time that journalism was pure? I mean, I was never into journalism, and I just never truly understood. And I'm getting more of an appreciation for it now when I hear people talk about just what journalists are supposed to, what they're supposed to at their heart be trying to do. And I feel like, and nothing against them personally, because they get swept up into the profit driven world we live in. But it seems like it's all on the internet. It's all clickbait, right? And on whether it's Fox News or MSNBC or CNN, it's all about viewership. You go to CNN.com every morning to check out what's going on. Every single thing is urgent and flashing at you. And you read it, it's like there's nothing exciting about this. They just have to get clicks, right? I mean, they got to keep the lights on. So I feel like that's in direct contradiction to pure journalism sometimes. I mean,
I think if you say pure journalism, it's sort of like saying pure communism or pure capitalism. I mean, those things don't exist. They exist in our minds. And people look back, well, I remember back in the day when the journalists were, not driven by this sort of stuff. But no, obviously they had to keep the lights on, and profit incentives are always going to be there to some degree. And if you're a journalist who wants to report on something, you'd rather report on things that people care about than things they don't, right? Even if the story's somewhat important. So these profit forces have always been operating, to one extent or another. And I think they operate in different outlets and in different ways. I mean, you can go to the internet right now and find good information if you want it, right? Yep. But people would rather get sucked into the clickbait stuff,
Yeah,
So.
no, it works. I fell into it plenty of times. And I'm like, what am I doing? It's like there's something there. It's like, wait a minute, how the hell did I get here? So it works.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, is everyone going to the internet because they want to find truth, or because they want to be entertained? Because they want to find what the real story is, or because they want to hear something tittillating or exciting or interesting? Right. And those are different things.
100%. All right. So you mentioned the big two: overhype, and you mentioned overhype to hurt Trump's hurt Trump's re-election possibility. And then the bioweapon leak. That's the other big one, right? Or it was manufactured, I should say. What's like I guess going back to those two, because the first question I have is, how does your partisanship play into this? You touched on it a second ago, but I'm imagining Democrat and liberals are much more. I should say Republicans are probably much more into it's overhyped because to hurt Trump's election. That's I imagine that's mostly a conservative type perspective.
It's more in that direction, but not exclusively.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So yes, it is correlated significantly with partisanship, whereas the bioweapon idea isn't. So that's equal chance of a Republican or a Democrat buying into that. So it's not partisanship that drives that idea. Right. And so I mean, you could put the shoe on the other foot, and I'm sure all your liberal and Democrat listeners out there will be like, no, but, put the shoe on the other foot. Imagine it was a Democratic president right now, and this happened. They may very well fall for the same thing. Like, maybe this is set up by somebody to hurt them in the election year, because the stakes would be the same. Right, politics ain't beanbag, and people are going to see this as potentially a threat against what they want to have happen.
Right.
So when we poll before any election, what we find is that in a normal election, you have equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats thinking that, if their candidate doesn't win come November, it will have been due to fraud.
Yeah.
So people are going to be on the lookout for, the other side's trying to, rig something in our favor, and this is probably it. And, because obviously Republicans would see this as something that's going to injure Trump's chances.
Right. Yeah, that one for me is a little weird because it lines up, it just checks all the boxes of what a conservative would believe, right? Because if it's overhyped, because if this thing is let me take a step back. Overhyping it would do a bunch of things that would be contrary to like a conservative perspective, right? If it's overhyped, that means you need more government to help you. You need to stay home, which means businesses close, which means, civil liberties are sort of affected and you kind of go out of business. Now you need government subsidies. It'll hurt Trump.
No, not necessarily. I mean, there's nothing in conservatism that would necessitate, not liking any of those things. I mean, you can pitch it in that way, but you can also pitch it as, we're all going to take individual action to fight back against this virus, and if we all individually do our things, and that means, cutting down on some things that we like and wearing masks and washing our hands. All of these individual actions together will solve it. And it's not like conservatism in general is against government action or against collective action. There are lots of things they want government to do.
Oh, sure.
Right. So it's not like the Republican Party is some libertarian bastion. They're not. I'd prefer it if they were. But I mean, they're all about collective action when it comes to banning abortion. Mm-hmm. And more recently, they seem to be in favor of tariffs and collective action against letting immigrants in and stuff like that. So there's no necessary reason why those things have to be connected.
Do you think there's any, I guess, and nothing doesn't get political, so here we go. But do you think there's any? I mean, in your heart of hearts, right? I mean, maybe I'm sure you don't have proof, or maybe you read something that made you say, that seems legit. Where there are some on the left that would that. Let's just say wouldn't be too upset if this whole thing was overhyped. I can't believe that in my heart of hearts, but I'm not into politics enough to even know where that would be.
Well, what do you mean? Do you mean like, do I believe that some Democrats are purposely overhyping it, or would be happy if it was overhyped? Or
yeah, maybe the latter, more the former, but yeah, something like that. Or just
I'm sure there are some people who are very cutthroat and, care more about changing the presidency and are like, wow, I'm glad this virus is going to get Trump out of office. So I guess there's some evil people like that. But I'm sure that's not the majority.
Right.
I'm sure there's some guy somewhere who wants that to happen.
Right. It's one of those things where I feel like if things are just transpiring to kind of fall in your favor to some degree, right? Like in this case, you maybe don't go out of your way to correct the record, right? Humans do that all the time. It's like lying by omission almost, right?
I guess I would say this. So when we ask the survey question, like, do you think it's being exaggerated? I don't know what the exact amount of taking it seriously is.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And even among public health officials, they may vary in some small amount between, I think it requires this amount of taking seriously or that amount of taking seriously or this response or that response. So it's not going to be perfectly even amongst all experts who know what they're doing, right? They're going to come to a consensus and then move forward based on that. But I don't think that I could say, you're taking it less seriously than some other guy, so that means they're right and you're wrong. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, what I would probably say is on the extremes is if you think that it's not real, then you're probably wrong.
Right.
And if you don't think that wearing a mask and washing hands and socially distancing are good things, then that's probably wrong. But I would also say there's probably people who are overdoing it on the other end. Like, I'm going to lock myself in a box for the next 5 years. Well, you're not doing the right thing either.
Right.
So there's probably. There's probably a correct answer that's somewhere in the middle, but I'm not in a position to say that it couldn't be a little bit one way or a little bit the other way.
Have your polls been global, like international, or just or mostly sampled from the U.S.? Like, what is the population
Most of what I do in polling is with the U.S.
Okay.
So what I've been doing this year is just U.S. I have been involved in polling across Europe and a little bit in some other countries in the past, but not since COVID. And I'll be repeating my polls in the U.S. Particularly in Florida, because I want to see what's going on in Florida for the next few months. So we'll be running polls every month or month and a half for the next few months.
So that those 30% numbers are U.S. population numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested to see what because there is a, I don't know if this is true or not, but, America has had a history of, liberty over, and freedom. And some said you hear some folks saying we're freedom obsessed. I personally don't like that at all. I think freedom is an amazing thing, and we need to, and that's we need to double and triple down on that when we can, but within reason, obviously. And I think sometimes the non-trust in the government tends to go a little too far. And it'd be interesting to see how that plays into the polls, U.S. versus outside the country. It'd be an interesting comparison there.
So it's tough to make comparisons across countries because people in different countries are going to believe different things because of the culture that's there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to be more concerned about Kennedy because he was our president rather than somebody in some other country, right? Because they're like, oh, who's Kennedy?
Oh, sure, in that case.
And if you flip it on the other, you put the shoe on the other foot, I mean, we are less likely to believe in moon landing conspiracy theories than some other countries.
Right.
Because that's a point of national pride for us.
Exactly.
Whereas, there have been polls of France where I think it's 3 times the amount of French believe, the percentage of French believe in the faked moon landing than the percentage of Americans, because that's our thing, and they're more than happy to say we faked it, whereas we're less willing to say that.
Yeah. The other team cheated. We didn't cheat, of course, right?
Yeah, and another thing too. I mean, government trust is sort of a weird thing, and I don't think that's ever been fully defined perfectly. But anyway, in terms of, it's not synonymous with conspiracy theorizing, right? And even more than that, conspiracy theorizing isn't always about government, and it doesn't prevent you from trusting the government. So there are a lot of liberals who, believed that that the government was behind the attacks of 9/11, 2001. But they also wanted government to take over healthcare.
Right.
So how does that jive? That I think the government just slaughtered 3,000 of our own people for some grand hoax. But I want them to be in charge of my medical decisions. What are you talking about? How does that make any sense? And then, you can't. Yeah, and I remember asking people, like, how does this make sense? Like, well, it's a different part of the government.
The really competent part will handle the healthcare.
Yeah, like some parts don't have an incentive to be evil, but just other parts are completely evil, and they have different incentives. It's just sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I look at things like the 9/11 thing and the moon landing. I'm like, look, I'm not like a government hater. I believe in more. I'm more of a. I guess when it comes to government stuff, I am a fan of more smaller type entities, and the government it has an important role. But giant, big government, from my opinion, absolutely does not work. Because human nature is human nature. There's people, and more people have more power. It tends to go. Actually, historically, it's always going the same direction. But that's not. I want to get to that point. But I always look at when folks have these like giant, grandiose conspiracy theories about the moon landing and 9/11. It's like that the odds that the government would seamlessly execute this ridiculously elaborate thing and without making one mistake along the way, it's like, could you, like, if you kind of overlay the little bit of common sense to it, like, yeah, there's no way that anyone could pull that off. So I don't know. It seems it's like zero on the plausibility factor.
But it's not the logic that's driving.
Yeah, right.
People tend to they have the worldview in which that makes sense. Yeah. They get to the belief, and then they find the evidence if they even bother to do that. Exactly. So it's not. So we can sit here and talk about it and say, oh my gosh, why do they believe this dumb thing? But to them, it just aligns with what they already believe about how the world works.
Yeah. No, it's not. Right. It's not a dumb thing. It's dumb is defined. Yeah, exactly.
But it goes beyond government too. So you have to, if this is a problem that a lot of people make, is they say, oh, it's just about government. So naturally, a lot of the theories sort of are going to lean to the right. Not all of them, but some will lean to the right, at least anecdotally. But a lot of conspiracy theories are about corporations or about other actors that are non-government. whether it's racial groups
Right.
or ethnic groups or whatnot. So it can be anyone powerful that you can accuse of conspiring.
Right.
So, and it's important to keep that wide open view, because people are going to have conspiracy theories that go after the things that they hate. And if you really like government, but you're a conspiracy theorist, you're going to accuse, other actors like Monsanto and things like that.
Right. So I mean, big picture. Obviously, there's something going on in humans and us to generate these conspiracy theories at a drop of a hat. I mean, I guess one, what did these things provide us psychologically, and two, is there something about this pandemic that's like a perfect storm for these theories?
So what they provide us, I don't know. I mean, other than the obvious, like, we have an explanation that sort of matches our worldview and tells us what we already believe.
Yeah.
In terms of, if people are indeed reaching for it as a way to address their uncertainty and their unknowing about something, it may do that, but it may not provide that good of a solve. Because imagine if you're like, geez, I can sleep better tonight knowing why this virus is here.
Yeah.
But I might not sleep better knowing that there's a secret entity that wants to kill all of us with a virus.
Right. Yeah.
So that may not help you sleep better. So they may be reaching for something, but they may not be getting it.
Yeah.
Right. And it may only make matters particularly worse.
I feel like I wonder if it's a tribal thing. I mean, we're tribal, right? But humans are tribal by nature, I think. I mean, I feel like because as soon as this COVID thing hit, I mean, it was. And now my radar is way up to this thing just because of this podcast and other other conversations I have with people. But as soon as the virus hit, every liberal friend I had was just and MSNBC, CNN, all you saw was Trump is fumbling this thing. He's the worst response we've ever seen. He's killing. His non-action or poor action is killing people. On the conservative side, immediately this was overblown. This is overblown. This is overblown. It's not real. The virus is a hoax. And it was almost, I mean, I honestly think it was 100%. If I would just, I know my friends' political leanings, and I love my friends on both sides. But they're both ridiculous sometimes. Where I'm like, really, and I even tweeted out something yesterday. I'm like, to that effect. I'm like, it's kind of lonely here in the thinking center, where you're like, it's like, but I think we're so tribal. It's like, I joked about it being lonely, but it's like. It's almost not fun at times because you can't jump on something and jump on a group Facebook page and have a blast with these people just shitting on the other side. And I feel like we want to do that so bad. I feel like, conspiracy theories probably in some way fill that need as well, where I can jump onto this whole group and be like, yes, this thing's a hoax. And then you got plenty of people that you're automatically in your group. You kind of got a tribe now. I feel like something like that's going on with us, but I have no data to prove that, but it feels like it is.
So tribalism matters a lot. So Republicans and Democrats are likely to believe in conspiracy theories that accuse the other side.
Yeah.
Right? And they're likely to believe in things that their leaders say. So if your leaders engage in conspiracy theories and you trust those leaders and you pay attention to them, then you'll wind up engaging in that rhetoric. So when you have a Republican senator bring a snowball onto the floor of the Senate and say, well, this proves climate change is fake, then Republicans who trust that person and pay attention to what they say are going to believe that too.
Do they believe it, or do they just go with it? Because if you just thought...
They believe it.
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't that, I mean... Yeah. That blows me. If they truly, in their heart of hearts, believe it, that's things like that, and not that specific example, but that's obviously one of them, But
you can't know. If you're some dude off the street, you don't know what the climate is doing. I mean, you have no way to measure this or understand it, and it's not your expertise. It's, and scientists only came to this through careful study of, decades of gathering data on this. So for the guy off the street to, it's not like
right.
Democrats believe in climate change because they went to the climate journals and read all the peer-reviewed research.
Oh, right.
I mean,
they're just their side.
That's how they got to it.
Their side just
everyone's
happened to be on the side of it. Yeah. Right.
That's it. Is that they're listening to the right people, and sometimes the people they listen to will be right, and sometimes the people they listen to will be wrong.
Yeah. But we are just sheep. I mean, isn't that the definition of what do they call them? The sheeple? I mean, it's just, I don't know, man. It's not very, I I guess it's fun. It's still a great system, but man, it's got to.
But that's the way politics. I
Yeah.
mean, we're in a system that calls on people to be knowledgeable about politics and rational and all these things, but in a sense, we can't really know
Exactly.
about all the issues we're voting on or what the issues are of the day, or you know.
You can't.
So we're asking a lot of people in democracy, and they have to they have to put off a lot of these views onto people who they think know what they're talking about. And just the problem is, a lot of our politicians don't really have expertise in most issues. They'll have expertise in one or a few issues, but not in so many. And
did R2D2 just enter your room?
Yeah, he just came in, and we're expecting people to know all this stuff, and we're expecting them to know who to trust, and we expect our politicians to know all sorts of things that they can't possibly know.
Right.
So the question is, are we asking too much of people, and should we be shocked when they're just sort of following elite cues?
Yeah.
Should we be shocked when people are listening to radio personalities and TV personalities?
Right.
No, we shouldn't be shocked. That's how it works, but it doesn't make it good. It's just that's how it works.
No, I haven't really been. I don't do a lot of I do a lot of podcasting and a lot of listening to podcasts. I get my news from unfortunately social media and podcasts, things like that. But have like the Rush Limbaughs and the Fox News and the MSNBCs. I mean, obviously those are all different sides, but have they been? Have any one of them really latched on to any of these conspiracies, and whether indirectly or directly, I guess, have they been?
Well, Rush Limbaugh has. I mean, we've got some quotes from him where he was questioning whether our public health officials are actually public health officials. He seemed to indicate that they're actually members of the deep state. There were some Fox News personalities who were suggesting that, it was being exaggerated and there might not actually be COVID patients at the hospitals. All this stuff is floating around there. And
all right, you gave
there.
two anti-right examples. What about an anti-left example? Got one?
So in terms of COVID, I don't know in terms of the COVID, but I mean, it's not that the MSNBC is free of this stuff. I mean, they spent 3 years with all sorts of Russia Trump nonsense.
Right.
Like, it's another bombshell. This is the beginning of the end for Donald Trump. And, we've got evidence that he was, a Russian agent. And it's like,
well, yeah.
And they all said, and this is the funny thing, in Mueller we trust. And then when Mueller didn't find the grand Russia conspiracy that involved Trump,
Yep.
I'm still getting almost 40% of Democrats saying, yeah, they think Trump is a Russian stooge.
Yeah, right. As soon as that report came out, immediately the conspiracy theorists on the left said it's BS, and he was in the pocket, and it's like, wow, you just can't win. What do you you can't say one thing.
They eventually had to leave it aside, but there's still a lot of them who push this Russia thing, even though it's Mueller just didn't find it.
Yep. Now the other question was, this pandemic is something unique about. I mean, obviously this is a global thing. It's not a U.S. thing, but we're talking mostly about U.S. politics. But I mean, is something about this pandemic, unique and kind of generating this perfect storm of conspiracy theories?
Yes and no. So it's not unique in the sense that, I mean, the conspiracy theories are the same stuff. We've been hearing about everything. Same theories, just different nouns.
Yeah.
So take what everyone was saying about AIDS and Zika and every other disease, and just change that to COVID, and you've got the latest conspiracy theory, or just change the billionaire that you're accusing of being up to no good.
Right.
So it used to be the Rothschilds, and now it's George Soros, and it used to be George Soros, and now it's Bill Gates.
Yeah.
So there's nothing new, and it's not that creative, and it's just sort of, to me, seeing all the different conspiracy theories, it's more continuity than it is change. And it's like, I'd like to tell them, guys, come up with something more interesting. This is boring. Yeah. It's the same stuff with everything. Come up with something new, please.
Yeah. Now, the last thing I want to talk about real quick is what I think everything's nuanced, right? We tend to talk about things in black and white a lot because you kind of have to take a position and talk about it and just kind of, and riff on something. But in a lot of cases, most things are nuanced, right? There's nothing binary in the universe. It's like you watch, I think there's kind of like these I don't want to call them soft, conspiracy theorists or like I think of like the examples of the Bakersfield doctors that went viral, Dr. Erickson and I forget the other guy's name, Masihi, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I don't know if you had caught that, but that went viral. They were basically talking about how they're, and this is not just them. This is a whole segment of the MD world that's been very vocal about this, and it's basically like, yeah, this is a virus. It's a bad thing, but we don't need to lock down the country. That's not the best thing to do, and et cetera, et cetera. They're taking more of a, and of course they have their jackets on that say MD. So it's kind of, I know what they do in there, but their points are not ridiculous. They don't come across as conspiracy theorists. They're just, I think they're, and I think most of them probably are conservative. I don't know that to be true, but I think the ones that I've seen are, but just we'll shelve that for a second. But I don't. Does this thing get confusing, or does that get conflated with conspiracy theories, or is this just one of them?
Sometimes, it's because those are all sort of floating around in the same area, right? Because sometimes people who believe in these theories that it's being exaggerated for a political purpose will latch on to these random doctors who say, "Oh, it's not as bad as whatever," and but I would say this: people are going to find the things that match with what they already believe about the world, and they're going to latch onto those things. And when they bump into information that contradicts that, they're going to get very upset. And it's like, I'll give you one example. I was on the 538 podcast, and I said, there are examples of people on the left engaging in widespread conspiracy theorizing. And I said the most prominent that I notice is, Bernie Sanders saying the 1% controls everything. Mm-hmm. And I got a bunch of pushback on Twitter on that from people saying, Uscinski's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and he should never be a guest on your show. And it's like,
the Twitterverse.
It's just like I said one thing they disagree with. I contradicted their one conspiracy theory that they hold dear, and therefore, I'm an idiot who doesn't know what he's talking about. And that says a whole lot more about them than it does about me.
Sure, you probably made 615 other perfect facts that they checked, they loved you on, and then you made one wrong turn.
No, hey, if they want to disagree with me, they want to disagree with me. Hey, that's fine, right. And I think that's wonderful too. But to say it only proves my own point when you have these people saying, he's contradicted my worldview, therefore he's bad.
Right.
And I've had people make memes about me like he's a stooge for the 1%, and he's this and that and the other thing, and it's like, get a life.
Take it as a compliment. You got a meme. That means people are listening, whether they love you or hate you, they're listening. But anyway, well, let's wrap up. What do you have out there, books wise? And I don't know, how do people find you? So, are you writing a book? I know you have several of them out there.
Yeah. So the easiest one to digest for a mainstream audience is Conspiracy Theories: A Primer. I wrote it as a textbook, but anyone can read it. It's very easy and it's short. And it's pretty cheap. You can get it on Amazon, and it came out just a few months ago. So it doesn't have anything about COVID in it, but it has all the building blocks that could help you understand conspiracy theories in general, and even the ones about the pandemic. Yeah.
Very cool. So anyone listening to this that is latched on to one of those, let's call it the big two, that the big two conspiracy theories, the bioweapon or the overhype, what would you say to them before we hang up?
Listen, as with all things, just consider that you could be wrong, and ask yourself, what evidence would you need to see that would change your mind?
How dare you, sir? How dare you? Well, Joe, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate this. I really enjoyed the conversation.
You're very welcome.
Well, have a great rest of your weekend.
You too.
And we're done. Hope you enjoyed it. This is Unlatched Mind. Check you out next time.